Imagine watching everything you've built crash by 99%, and then coming back from that and turning your company into a multi-billion-dollar giant, and doing so by unlocking what some are calling an infinite money glitch. Well, that's exactly what Michael Saylor did, from nearly losing it all to becoming the king of corporate Bitcoin. Michael Saylor's journey is nothing short of legendary.
There is no second best.
Today, we're diving into one of the greatest comeback stories in business history. How Michael Saylor and Microstrategy turned a catastrophic fall into a revolutionary rise. And all thanks to Bitcoin. And this isn't just any comeback. It's a total reinvention of corporate finance. Through a financial strategy so powerful, it's changing the game for everyone. We did the research, and what Saylor has pulled off, well, it's never been done before. We have a massive comeback story to get to. I think it's time to send it. All right, here we go. 20 years ago, Microstrategy was on the verge of collapse. A massive accounting scandal during the dot-com bubble wiped out 99% of the company's value. Imagine being in Michael Saylor's shoes. You've built this massive company, and in what feels like an instant, it's gone. The stock tanked from nearly $3,000 a share to under $10. Most CEOs would have quit, stepped down, or just sold out. But not Michael Saylor. Fast forward to today, and Microstrategy is one of the biggest players in the Bitcoin space. Holding more Bitcoin than any other company on the planet, MicroStrategy stock has rebounded dramatically since 2020, and it's largely thanks to one monumental decision. Saylor bet the farm on Bitcoin. Let's go back to the early 2000s. MicroStrategy had just gone public and was flying high as a leader in business intelligence. But then the crash hit. They lost almost everything, with the stock plunging 99%. It was brutal. How do you come back from that? Saylor didn't quit. Instead, he spent the next 2 decades keeping MicroStrategy alive, though the company's future was always in doubt. Fast forward to 2020. The world is in chaos, and central banks are printing trillions of dollars. Saylor, who once dismissed Bitcoin, now saw it as the answer to a much bigger problem. Fiat money was being devalued at a record pace, so in August 2020, Saylor pulled the trigger and MicroStrategy became the first public company to adopt Bitcoin as its primary treasury asset.
When I first bought Bitcoin, I was ready to retire. I thought I had served more than 30 years as a public company CEO. I have nothing left to prove in the world. There's not much for me to do. I'll just go ahead and retire and gracefully disappear from history. And Bitcoin plopped itself into my life and first teased me and then seduced me. And then it dragged me onto that stage today, right? And so I was dragged onto a world stage, and I found myself now, instead of quietly retiring, I was now drawn into a role of advocacy and obsess over things that I never need to obsess over, and go back on CNBC or go on Fox, go on television, and or sit down and record 1,000 hours of podcast. And these are all things that I discovered late in life. I would say I'm a late bloomer, right? Like I'm much older than the average Bitcoiner, right? And so it's like, how did this all happen? And I think it's Bitcoin inspired me, maybe inspired me, catalyzed me. It changed how I spend my time. It changed my intellectual interest. It changed our corporate strategy, and it gave me a mission, and I felt compelled to do it.
Saylor wasn't just dipping his toe into Bitcoin. He went all in. The company borrowed money, raised funds, and poured everything into accumulating Bitcoin. And it paid off! MicroStrategy now holds over 250,000 Bitcoin, valued at over $15 billion. That's over 1.2% of Bitcoin's entire supply. And the stock? MicroStrategy stock is up hundreds of percent since the Bitcoin pivot, easily making it one of the best performing stocks in the market over the last 4 years.
Bitcoin is the best crypto asset. Okay, what's the second best? There is no second best. There's no second best crypto asset. There's a crypto asset. It's called Bitcoin, right?
Here's where it gets crazy. Michael Saylor didn't just bet on Bitcoin. He engineered what some are referring to as the infinite money glitch. Let me break it down for you. Since 2020, Saylor has borrowed nearly $4 billion at interest rates as low as 0.8%. He took that money and poured it into Bitcoin, an asset that's been averaging a 55% annual return during the same period. So while he's paying less than 2% interest, he's making over 50% in returns. This is what we call financial engineering at its finest. But it isn't just luck or timing, it is pure strategy. Michael Saylor has turned Microstrategy into a volatility product, multiplying Bitcoin's gains. For every $1 Bitcoin moves, Microstrategy stock can move $2, thanks to the leverage he's built into the system. Now let's put this into perspective. No company has made a comeback quite like Microstrategy. We hear stories of great turnarounds in business, like Apple's revival when Steve Jobs returned or Tesla surviving the brink of bankruptcy. But here's what makes Saylor's story stand out above the rest. In the early 2000s, when Microstrategy lost over 99% of its value, the situation looked hopeless to say the least. Again, the stock dropped from nearly $3,000 to less than $10. No companies survive that kind of collapse. Most would have gone bankrupt, been taken over, or just faded into obscurity. Think about it. Recovering from a near total wipeout is absolutely unheard of. Apple, for example, was in trouble in the late 90s, but its stock didn't crash by 99%. Steve Jobs returned and turned the company around with innovation and the launch of game-changing products, the iPhone, and that's incredible, but Apple still had its core business and resources intact. Then you have Tesla, which was on the verge of bankruptcy in 2008, but again, it never lost 99% of its stock's value. The Tesla comeback was driven by visionary leadership and innovative electric vehicles, but it wasn't a complete financial collapse followed by a market-defining pivot like MicroStrategy. In MicroStrategy's case, the company wasn't saved by a new product or a technological breakthrough. It was a strategic financial move that changed everything. Michael Saylor didn't just play defense to survive, he went on the offensive. His decision to pivot the entire company's treasury strategy into Bitcoin was bold, unprecedented, and let's be honest, quite risky at the time. But here's what's wild. Saylor turned that risk into a historic financial recovery. By betting on Bitcoin, MicroStrategy went from near bankruptcy to becoming one of the most talked about companies in all of corporate finance. No other company has made a comeback on this scale, especially after losing basically everything. When you look at the numbers today, it's staggering. MicroStrategy stock has multiplied several times over since the pivot. MicroStrategy is outperforming major indices and even other tech giants like Amazon and Microsoft during the same period. The company's market cap is soaring, and its strategic vision for the future with Bitcoin has put it in a league of its own.
I'm the longest lasting CEO of a publicly traded enterprise software company. I lived to see 99% of my peers quit or lose their job. 99% mortality rate amongst my competitors. I'm not proud of this, but I'm the only public company officer, maybe the only public company CEO in the history of the world that actually lived to see his stock decline in value by 99.8%. My stock went from $333 a share to 42 cents a share. If you were on my board of directors, you probably would have fired me if I did not have a controlling stake in the company. I kept my job and I kept the company, and I didn't dissolve it and sell it off to a megacorp to become the 167th division of IBM. That's why I'm here today. So hold on for dear life or whatever it means, right? I get it, right? It's pretty obvious, but I find it's a joke, when people get on crypto Twitter and they talk about how they might have to sell if Bitcoin trades down 5%, or it's like, you guys haven't lived through anything.
This isn't just another corporate turnaround. It is the greatest comeback in modern business history. And no one else has done it in the way that Saylor has. When you combine the scale of the loss with the audacity of the Bitcoin bet, it's a story unlike anything we've seen before in the stock market. Now, while there is no company or business in the modern era, we can look to the past to see a Saylor-like play in the Weimar Republic. But before we break it down along with Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy's $1 trillion endgame, look at our likes!
I gotta pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
Hey, help us spread the sound money gospel and keep the lights on. Give them some pamp as we take a moment to recognize the masters of Bitcoin self-custody, our sponsors, The Bitcoin Way. Simply Bitcoin Originals are powered by the Bitcoin Way. They bring over 25 years of cybersecurity experience. They are your IT team in the Bitcoin world. They help bridge that gap from the why Bitcoin to the how Bitcoin. And as your dedicated Bitcoin IT team, the Bitcoin Way is here to guide you from start to finish on your journey to properly self-custody your Bitcoin. From your first wallet and node to advanced multi-sig security, inheritance planning, and much more, the Bitcoin Way has got you covered, and they will hold your hand and walk you through the process toward becoming a sovereign individual. Okay, now what Saylor's doing here isn't completely new in the world of finance. It's called a speculative attack. History has seen this before. Just look at Hugo Steins, an entrepreneur during the Weimar Republic's hyperinflation. Steins borrowed massive amounts of the falling German mark to buy hard assets, and then he went on to become one of the wealthiest men in the country. Saylor is doing the exact same thing. He's borrowing US dollars, which lose value every day, and turning them into Bitcoin, the hardest asset known to man, in a world where central banks print trillions. Saylor's bet on Bitcoin is a playbook others are definitely going to try to follow. They are following it. Seriously, Microstrategy's bet on Bitcoin is more than just some bold investment. It's changed how corporate finance works. Saylor has pioneered the concept of using Bitcoin as a corporate treasury reserve asset. He's inspired other companies to do the same. Just look at Marathon Digital and Metaplanet. Now think about this for a second. MicroStrategy owns more Bitcoin than most countries, and if Bitcoin keeps rising, MicroStrategy could become the first trillion-dollar company with Bitcoin as its backbone. And Saylor's vision doesn't stop at being the largest corporate holder of Bitcoin. He sees MicroStrategy becoming a Bitcoin bank, a financial institution built around Bitcoin, offering loans, equities, and other financial products tied to Bitcoin. He's even talking about creating a company worth 300 to 400 billion using Bitcoin as collateral. This isn't just a comeback story. This is a revolution in how companies store value, how they leverage Bitcoin, and how they interact with financial markets. So when we talk about Michael Saylor, we're not just talking about another CEO who made a smart investment. We're talking about someone who redefined corporate finance. He took a company that had lost 99% of its value and turned it into a Bitcoin giant.
MicroStrategy, through these convertible notes, in a rising rate environment, the 10-year yield went from 1% to 5% from 2021 to today, or 4.5%. MicroStrategy's zero interest rate convertible debt from 2021 to today is up more than 200% from par. That does not happen in the bond market. That never happens. It's the best performing debt instrument in the world from par. Zero interest rate convertible note. Why? Because it's big. It's a Bitcoin proxy. So the stock, it's a big story. Their Bitcoin holdings are a big story. They have 1% of the Bitcoin. But the convertible note, taking your balance sheet, Bitcoinizing the balance sheet, not only Bitcoinizing, because Bitcoin's notoriously volatile, but also adding a sprinkle of liabilities to your asset liability balance sheet. So you get levered Bitcoin. And then that mark-to-market volatility of your shares, of your common stock, of your balance sheet is not a weakness. That's a strength. And people don't understand why that's a strength. That's the entire reason they can borrow at zero. Yeah. They're just looking at, similar to how options trader would look at if you go on say Robinhood and you're looking at the value of calls and puts out of the money, stock's at 10, a call for 15 or a put at 5, the value of that for a stock that doesn't move at all and is just flat and dead, those options are worth nothing. But if you crank the volatility from 20% annualized to 100% annualized for that stock that's trading at $10, the $15 calls and $5 puts are really, really valuable. So MicroStrategy can borrow at zero because they have a balance sheet that's Bitcoinized, and not only 100% Bitcoinized, 120% Bitcoinized. And so this is the crack in the matrix.
Hey, if you enjoyed this breakdown of Saylor's legendary comeback, don't forget to like, subscribe, give us a pap. Help us spread the Sound Money Gospel and hit that notification bell to get all the latest Simply Bitcoin content. And follow us on Twitter for all the latest breaking news. Hey, and let us know in the comments, do you think MicroStrategy's Bitcoin strategy will lead them to $1 trillion valuation? Is Michael Saylor the John Elway of finance? If it's true, Elway was like fine wine too. He got pummeled in 3 Super Bowls before an epic finish. And if history is rhyming, Saylor could be well on his way toward back-to-back Super Bowls before riding off into the sunset. Space Monkeys!
Ready to sacrifice himself for the greater good.
If you ain't bullish, you are foolish! Click here to keep this party going, and I'll catch you all next time. Peace!
If you prefer to go down with the ship, fuck you.